Time to pull up a chair, because we've got another good story today for you in the rLounge. Husband kicked me out of the house his father gifted us for the wedding. 1 month later, I got the house. I, 25 female, have been married to Tim, 25 male, for a very brief period of 6 months. Yes, I know it was a short stint, but I'm glad it is about to perish because it was horrendous. I met Tim at the university, and we fell for each other's charm. We dated for a year before we decided to get married. Our marriage plan came as a surprise for everyone because we were too young. My parents asked me to reconsider my hasty decision, and so did Tim's parents. However, we both were too passionate about being married and ignored everyone's advice. After the university, Tim joined his father's business, and I joined a corporate company that paid me a decent salary, so we didn't see any problem getting married. My father-in-law, 65 male, is a real estate businessman. He has accumulated a handful of properties for his children in the city. He has 3 sons, and the youngest one is Tim. He gave each of his sons a house as a wedding present. So when we got married, as a tradition, my father-in-law gifted us a house at our wedding. However, that gifted house was still under construction because my father-in-law didn't anticipate that his youngest son, Tim, would get married so soon. Hence, the construction of that house was on his low priority list. We married soon after our college. While I expressed my gratitude to my father-in-law for this generous gift, Tim complained that he didn't get the ready-to-move-in house like his elder brothers, Peter and Mark, got. He was upset that he had to wait for 6 months to get possession of the house. I was shocked at Tim's childishness and asked him to act maturely, but his mother, Linda, 55 male, intervened, saying he was the youngest and the most pampered one. My father-in-law appreciated my gratitude and said he wished Tim was half as grateful as I was, although he said that humorously, but it was a fact that Tim was a brat as well as a mama's boy. However, I didn't realize this back then. Prior to our wedding, Tim and I used to live in my apartment. Although he contributed to the rent and other bills, the apartment belonged to me. Since the possession of Tim's house was still 6 months, we continued to live in our apartment after the marriage. During those 6 months, I and my father-in-law fostered a great relationship. He treated me like his own daughter. He often remarked that he wished to have a daughter like me. I was moved by his kindness. Sadly, I couldn't foster a similar bond with my mother-in-law, Linda. She was dead cold to me, and her response to my conversation would mostly be an ignorant plaster smile or a nod. She didn't trouble me, though, so it was fine. It is almost safe to say that she was a stranger to me. She was so engrossed in pampering Tim that she forgot the existence of others, including father-in-law and her 2 elder sons. 6 months went by in a blink of an eye, and finally, it was time for us to move into our new house. Tim and I both were excited about it. My father-in-law organized a grand housewarming party at our new house as a gesture to compensate for the delay. The housewarming party was an unforgettable celebration. Our friends and family gathered, toasting our new beginnings and creating cherished memories. I felt so blessed to be a part of that family. We shifted to the house with our belongings the day after the party. That very day, Tim had to leave for his week-long work trip, so it was ultimately I who had to take charge of setting up the house. It took a week for me to wind up all the tasks. As the week passed, I patiently waited for Tim to return from his trip so we could finally start living together in our new house. When Tim returned, I was expecting him to be surprised and thankful to me for setting up the grandeur. But things turned out to be the opposite. I found a completely different Tim on that day. He acted strange when I asked him about the home interiors I had designed. He looked around and mysteriously said that his mother would like it. I was still wrapping my head around when the doorbell rang. It was Linda. She walked past me, hugged Tim, and remarked under her breath, "She's still here?" I didn't know what that was supposed to mean. Linda's behavior towards me was exactly the same as always. She would just walk over to me, interrupt while I would speak, and wouldn't bother to even exchange greetings with me. I felt like I didn't exist for her and that she couldn't see or hear me. Hence, her attitude was my second concern. The first concern was to find out why did she say, "She's still here?" Was I not supposed to be there any longer? Tim responded that he had just arrived at the house and did not get time to convey the message to me. He said he was glad that Linda was there so they could do it together. Linda said that she didn't have the energy to deal with me. Her exact words were, "Tim, darling, I can't sit here and explain to this nincompoop. You wanted this house. I helped you get it. Now it's your headache. How you want to deal with it?" I was feeling giddy by their conversation. Both this mother-son duo sounded shady to me. Usually, I keep my distance from Linda, but listening to their conversation, I just couldn't help but ask Tim about it. Tim fetched his bag to pull out some papers and handed them to me. I saw it was a divorce paper. I almost fainted. This was the last thing I imagined to happen that evening. I was speechless. I looked at him and asked if that was supposed to be a joke. Tim replied that the joke was on me, that I fell prey to their trap. He said he wanted the house and not a wife, but his father wouldn't have given him the house without a wife. So he and Linda made this plan of putting up a wedding. He said he would have married a rock or a tree for that matter. I fought back and accused him of treason and using me for his mean purpose. Tim turned into a monstrous self and called me a gold digger. He said I shouldn't act innocent because I, too, was fascinated by his riches and the house. To be honest, I got to know about the house only at my wedding altar. Besides, I had never taken a penny from Tim during the course of dating. Linda lounged on the sofa unaffected by our conversation, smirking and scrolling through her phone as if we were non-existent. But when I started cursing Tim, she pounced on me. She threatened to smack my head if I said a word to her spoiled brat. To be honest, I was terrified by her threats. She had cunning and criminal eyes, and her wicked brain was quite capable of any crime. It was already dark outside, and the house was located at a distant corner of the street. There were not enough houses nearby, and it was rare to spot anyone near the house after sunset. I wasn't feeling comfortable fighting back with these monsters, so I played down. I prioritized my safety over my anger. I hastily packed up as much as I could and left the house. As I walked out of the house, I felt like escaping my grave. I was sweating and shivering with anxiety, disbelief, and uncertainty. I lodged into a hotel at the heart of the city to ensure my safety. After recovering from my state of shock and trauma, I was raging with anger to avenge the humiliation and betrayal. I didn't go to my parents' house because I didn't want them to be disturbed by this news. Additionally, they would have dissuaded me from taking any action against these two beasts. But I was not a puppet who would let those beasts get away so easily. I felt helpless in that situation. At first, I considered calling up my father-in-law, but I refrained. I had no evidence of their misbehavior, and without that, he would have taken his family's side. It wasn't difficult for Linda or Tim to brainwash and fool him, so I struck off that idea. It's been a couple of days since I moved out of that house. I have not lodged a police complaint yet or spoken to anyone about it. Today morning, while searching for something in my purse, I found a spare key to the house, and an idea struck me. Yes, to go back to the house and collect some evidence against the mother and son. I'm thinking of planting some camera and mic so that I can record their evil conversation and present it in court. As of now, I have no evidence of their threats and wrongdoings, and without that, it would be difficult to prove my case. But I'm terrified to step inside that house. I don't know what to do. Does anyone have any better idea of pulling this off? I'm so sorry, OP. I'm sorry he manipulated you and your relationship like that in order to get the house. Linda sounds like the mother from hell. She has some strange messed up relationship with Tim. I've heard of parents willing to do whatever it takes for the kids, but this is a whole other level. Your father-in-law doesn't deserve to be duped like this either. He's only trying to help his sons, and they're completely taking advantage of the fact that the dad has the ability to do so. Why not just go and speak to your father-in-law? But maybe go into the house and get your stuff out of there first? Because technically, I think the house is Tim's and he can get you for trespassing. Maybe your father-in-law can help. Update 1. Hello all, thanks for all the wonderful advice. So, as I said, I bought some hidden cameras and mics to plant inside the house to gather evidence against my husband and mother-in-law. But while doing so, I hit on a jackpot. Although I was terrified, somehow I mustered the courage to trespass on the house. But before that, I ensured to check if the house was empty. I used the hotel's landline to dial Tim's office, pretending to be a saleswoman. His secretary answered the call and informed me that Tim was busy in the meeting room with his clients. I repeated the same to check for Linda. I called up on their landline, and when Linda responded, I hung up. By this, it was confirmed that they were both not present in that new house then. I knew that the house was empty. I rushed to the house and sneaked in using the duplicate keys. I placed several small mics and cameras in different corners of the house, which would capture all the conversations of the house. While doing this business, I stumbled upon Linda's bag, which she was carrying on the other day. I scavenged through the bag to find some shocking documents. It carried the papers of all the properties owned by Henry, including his will. I was horrified to see those papers. I went to that house to plant my mic to gather shreds of evidence to prove my case in court, but I stumbled on a jackpot. I scanned and saved all the soft copies of the documents to read it later. I went back to my hotel room and read all the papers carefully. There was an original will signed by Henry, where he had equally divided all his wealth between his 3 sons. Tim and Linda had forged that and made a duplicate will where they named Tim to be the only heir. Could you believe that they were hatching such a heinous plan to sideline their own family members? The duplicate papers were unsigned, which meant that they were planning to trick Henry into signing the duplicate will. I had the proof to expose these monsters, so I called Henry and asked him to meet me at a cafe. I told him it should be a discreet meeting, and I had something very important to reveal. He was a wise man. After finishing his office, he came alone to avoid any suspicions. I narrated the horror to Henry, and he was in tears to hear about my plight. He said that Linda had told him that I insisted Tim transfer the house in my name, and when he refused, I asked him for a divorce and left the house. Henry suspected all these to be lies, hence he asked Tim about it. When Tim, too, confirmed that he was no longer willing to live with me, Henry didn't call me or interfere further. He held my hands and apologized to me for his wife and son's behavior. I then told him that I had something else to show him. I pulled out the pictures of all the documents I had collected that day and showed them to him. He was frozen to death. He started sobbing. He was shocked to find his own son and his wife had been making plans to destroy him and his 2 other sons. I also informed Henry about the mic which I had planted inside the house. After some time, I got a notification from the app that the mic was recording something. We quickly plugged in the earphones to listen. Although the camera could not capture their clear image because of the angle issue, Tim and Linda were heard clearly talking about the papers. Tim was complaining that in the new will, Peter's, his eldest brother, and Mark's, his second brother, house were not added. Linda was heard giving him the logic that those houses were gifted to them by Henry on their wedding, and if they had added that too in the will, it would create suspicions in everyone's mind. Tim was not happy even after making himself the sole heir of all of Henry's business and properties. He wanted to rip off the roof from his brother's head. What a pathetic man he was. They also mocked me and said I was such a fool to fall for their trap. While leaving the house, they were celebrating their win that Tim was able to get a house at 23 by using me, when the other 2 brothers had to wait until they actually got settled. They were also happy to get all of Henry's wealth. The conversation between them boiled every drop of my blood. I was raging with anger, but Henry was surprisingly calm. After listening to the entire conversation, he asked me to email him the recordings. I was more surprised at how Linda could let her 2 other sons suffer because of Tim's childishness and greed. Henry informed me that his other 2 sons, Peter and Mark, were from his first wife, who died when the boys were 2 and 1. Henry married Linda after 5 years of his first wife's death. I was shocked to know this because no one ever mentioned that Linda was not their actual mother. Henry was also shocked because he had never seen Linda differentiating between his 3 sons, and even his sons had never complained about Linda. I guess she was just a good actor, masking her true self all these years. We silently sat there for some time to let the information sink in. Henry then made a few calls, which I assumed to be his lawyer. He assured me that he won't let Tim or Linda cause any harm to me. He also urged me to return to my parents so I could be safer. I traveled back to my house yesterday. I told my parents about everything. As expected, my mother screamed at me for risking my life to sneak into that house, plant those mics, and gather the information, but I was proud of myself. I felt satisfied that I was able to dig out the information just at the right time. Henry called my father yesterday and assured me that he would deal with his wife and son and that I won't be harmed in any way. He also lauded me for my courageous move. As my father-in-law suggested, I blocked Tim and Linda and didn't sign the divorce papers yet. He had also asked me not to take any calls from an unknown number. Tim or Linda could call from an unknown number to harass me. I don't know how he is going to deal with the situation, but I just wish that he stays safe. I'll update you as soon as something happens. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Linda killed the first wife to get what she wanted from Henry. Update 2. Hi all, thanks for all the applause. A lot has happened in the last month since I was last updated. I was in regular touch with my father-in-law because I was worried about his safety. He kept me updated about his move. After I met with him, he went to his lawyer and made a new will. He disowned Tim and Linda and divided all his properties between Peter and Mark. He had also frozen his will and added a clause that there would be no other changes in the future. In case someone presented a different version than this one, it should be discarded. Henry had lodged a police complaint against the mother-son duo with the help of the evidence I provided. They were booked with a criminal offense. Apparently, Henry called his army of attorneys at home and summoned his family, including Linda and his 3 sons. He did it so suddenly that Tim and Linda didn't get a chance to think. The lawyer read out the will in detail, followed by Henry's confrontation. The recordings I provided to Henry, where Tim and Linda discussed their evil plans, were played in front of everyone while they both cried foul play. Tim and Linda tried to defend themselves, saying that the recording was fake and I was manipulating Henry for my own gains. They both swore to ruin my life, and when Henry's lawyer told them that they were booked with a criminal offense, they tried to run away, cursing Henry. They hid in a hotel from where they were arrested the next morning. That very night, Tim and Linda blew my phone with their calls and voicemails. Although I had blocked their number, I could see a notification of the incoming calls coming from blocked numbers. They also sent voicemails to my parents' landline, but we decided to use them against them in court. I have also filed a harassment case against them, along with the divorce and mental torture. My phone breathed relief only when they got arrested. Peter and Mark were also present, and they both were shocked that Linda had been masking her true self for all these years, and Tim was such a crook. They both visited me with their wives and thanked me for exposing Tim and Linda, who were planning to bring them on the streets. Yesterday, my father-in-law visited my house with gifts and flowers. He apologized and thanked me for everything. In addition to all this, he gave me something very unexpected. He transferred Tim's house in my name. I was shocked at this generosity. I thanked him for his kindness but refused to take the house. I told him that Linda and Tim had already named me as a gold digger and I didn't want to prove them right by taking the house. He said it was the least he could do to pay me back and I should consider it an award for my honesty and courage. I kept refusing it until he got emotional, saying that he saw me as his daughter he never had. He also assured me that he had taken good care of Tim and Linda and it will be years before they can both walk out of that prison. Henry sounds like an absolute angel. You're lucky to have a man like him in your life. Unfortunately, it took marrying your scummy ex to meet such a wonderful man. I'm so glad he's taking care of you and looking out for you. And he's right about the courage. It takes guts to be able to do what you did. You saved him a whole lot of trouble down the road. What if Linda and Tim had planned something more heinous, like potentially getting rid of Henry? Update 3. This is going to be a shorter update and mostly the last one. A year has passed since my divorce, and I'm yet not able to wrap my head around the scam that happened to me. As I mentioned in my last update, after much contemplation, I agreed to take the house. However, when I entered the house, I felt haunted. It brought back the memories of that harrowing evening when Tim and Linda scared me to death. So I decided to sell the property. I asked Henry before making the decision, and he agreed to it. So yesterday the deal got closed, and I sold the house. I'm trying my best to move on in life. I'm even seeking therapy to get rid of the nightmare of that evening. As for Tim and Linda, they are still in jail because no one helped them bail out. Henry has used his money and wit at the right place and threatened Linda's and Tim's friends with dire consequences if they dare to bail them out. The family and relatives are anyways so angry with them that no one even went to meet them. Henry and the two brothers, Peter and Mark, check on me regularly. I have particularly grown closer to Henry and see him as the fatherly figure. The last time I spoke to him, he told me he was planning to retire and move with his uncle to their ancestral house in the countryside. I encouraged him because he had worked really hard all his life and needed a peaceful retirement. I'm sorry it all ended up here, OP. I can't imagine how traumatizing that would have been to go through. Despite it all, I'm grateful you have some cushion after selling the house. Hopefully this will set you up for a wonderful future with someone who will treat you with the love and respect that you deserve. Wishing you all the best, OP. Would you have installed cameras or would you have gone straight to your father-in-law? What would you have done differently? Let us know in the comments below. And thank you for following along today on rLounge. Before you go, be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you have something you want to say regarding today's content, we want to hear it. See you next time.